Moving right along, after a sip of River Moon coffee, please. According to the CDC, I don't know how this information is getting out, but it is, 86 children and 19,000 adults have died from flu so far this winter season, flu season. And almost 500,000 people have been hospitalized so far. So a panel of scientific experts, medical primarily, epidemiologists, chemists, virologists, this panel of scientific experts that advises the Food and Drug Administration on vaccine policy, they learned yesterday morning that the upcoming meeting to discuss next year's flu vaccines have been canceled. And that panel of scientific experts, has been the target of criticism and ridicule by this fucking moron, this guy with worms in his brain, this heroin addict, Kennedy Jr. The F.D.A., somebody who works for Kennedy, sent an email to members of the panel, and that panel is called the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. But an email was sent on Monday informing them of the cancellation. That's according to a senior official who is familiar with this decision. And there was no reason given. That panel is supposed to meet March 13th. So the scientific panel of experts who have a really difficult job trying to guess in which direction the flu vaccine is going to mutate during a certain season. And we have a monster heading our way. I guess you're aware of that. This combination of bird flu and COVID-19, which is still circulating, these different viruses that are out there, along with your typical generic winter version of flu, if there is such a thing, and that generic version mutates sometimes several times within a flu season. It's just the nature of viruses to do that. So the panel usually has to get together and try to use science to come up with an almost impossible result. And that is, okay, what's the flu virus going to look like next year so that we can develop a vaccine against it? And that requires thought, research, discussion among scientific experts. And this fucking bum with the worms in his brain orders the meeting canceled. One committee member, you've probably seen him on MSNBC, Dr. Paul Offit of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, who is a very definite critic of this dumbass RFK, confirmed the cancellation, and he warned that the cancellation is probably going to interfere with or delay the production of flu vaccines for next year. If you haven't gotten your flu shot yet this year, you've decided you're going to roll the dice and see if you can survive without a flu shot. That's your call. Absolutely. Anyway, Dr. Offit said, quote, "It's a 6-month production cycle. So one can only assume that we're not picking flu strains this year in preparation, for next year." Now, the cancellation, and by the way, there was a postponement last week of a similar meeting of scientific advisors at CDC for other issues. But this cancellation plays right into the fears among scientists who worry that Kennedy will use his exalted position now to continue what he's done for 20 years, cause people to doubt the efficacy of vaccines, and he will interfere with the regulatory process that leads to the approval of vaccines. And we see a result of this right now in Texas and New Mexico. It began in a certain population of religious nutfucks who, I'm sorry, but that's the term I use. I don't give a shit of what religion they are. They're crazier than hell. But these religious freaks who decided, no, we're not gonna vaccinate our kids. No, we're not gonna. So as of this afternoon, when I'm recording this, there's been one child die, and approaching about 200 cases now of measles. And the thing that is appalling to me, among other things about our current state of this country, is that measles was declared eradicated 25 fucking years ago. 25 in the year 2000. Because prior to the arrival of George asshole Bush, the scientific basis of governing, the scientific basis of healthcare, of international relations. Yeah, we made some mistakes. We fucked up, but science was still an underpinning. And the science had worked its ass off to get rid of as many diseases as possible, especially viral diseases. And measles was declared gone. Not anymore. A lawyer for some of these vaccine makers, yes, they're made by companies. A lawyer for some of these companies said the postponement was concerning because the schedule for making the flu vaccine tends to be very strict. I mean, certain scientific protocols that have to be met, and they have to be met in sequence. That's the nature of this kind of science. This lawyer, Richard Hughes, he said strains are usually selected in the FDA meeting in February or March using data from the World Health Organization. You remember the World Health Organization, the organization that this filthy fucking Donald Trump has also tried to gut and is succeeding. What the fuck is with these people? I mean, this is healthcare stuff. This is life and death. Well, anyway, the World Health Organization was the organization that the United States walked away from as soon as this filthy goddamn Trump got his hands on the presidency. This attorney for the vaccine makers, he said, quote, "The stakes are incredibly high," end quote. Meaning that if the science is not made available through discussions and research and epidemiologists and CDC and WHO and F.D.A. and all these organizations that this filthy pig Trump has decided to gut, if those decisions aren't made, if that science isn't developed, well, he said, what is really particularly concerning is the fact that this year's flu season has been especially intense. Which means a couple of things. First of all, that more and more people are deciding not to be vaccinated. And who's going to die from that? Old people and children. I can see how us old folks are not really seen as that important, but kids? But Trump is such a filthy, goddamn anti-life monster, as are all these phony Christians who cluster around him like flies around a shit pile. He doesn't care. None of these people care about human life, about health. They're incapable of caring. So all of us have to deal with the fact that we have this monster, this death-dealing monster, Donald Trump, in charge. Among the people that RFK has singled out for his nasty criticism and his challenge to their scientific expertise is the guy I mentioned a moment ago, Dr. Offit. Offit was an inventor of a rotavirus vaccine that was later developed by a pharmaceutical giant, Merck, and approved by the FDA almost 20 years ago. This is before Dr. Offit served on the FDA advisory panel, and his research was funded by the National Institutes of Health, not the drug company. His hospital, the Children's Hospital, I believe, which owned the patent on the vaccine, licensed the patent to Merck so that Merck could start producing it, for Christ's sake. Now, committee members on this advisory panel are required, and have been for some time, to declare their collaborations and recuse themselves from voting on issues that might have an effect on their pocketbooks, right? Kennedy has said he wants more stringent restrictions, although he hasn't defined those restrictions. One assumes, given the kind of bullshit he's been pumping out for 2 decades, that those restrictions would include nobody on the panel can have anything to do with vaccine production. Jesus Christ. So the meeting that has been canceled on the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, that meeting would have covered topics related to a number of vaccines, not just next year's flu vaccine, but to a number of vaccines, including one that protects against a human papillomavirus, right, that Kennedy has been critical of. And he, as a matter of fact, he has been working on a lawsuit against the maker of that virus, Merck. And that is the first of its kind, I believe. That's the anti-uterine cancer vaccine. Why in the fuck would Kennedy? Well, whatever. Oh, and by the way, in Kennedy's capacity as an attorney working against the manufacturer of that vaccine, he said that any fees that he earns from the lawsuit, he would give to an adult son. What? Oh, Malloy, don't try to understand it. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, I guess by now you have heard what happened this morning at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Workers who have been fired or placed on leave as part of the Orange Bastards' dismantling of that agency came back to their office to gather things up in Washington, D.C. this morning. And they were given 15 minutes when they showed up, 15 minutes to clear out their offices, and they were escorted by federal officers. What would that be? Secret Service? U.S. Marshals? Federal officers. The order came, of course, from this filthy pig bastard Donald Trump. 15 minutes to go clean out your office, get your shit, whether you've been there for 20 years or 2 weeks. Get your stuff and get out. 15 minutes. This from a slug, a piece of human waste, Donald Trump, who has used every device known to human beings to delay any kind of action against him that he doesn't like. But where it concerns employees who have dedicated themselves to the U.S. Agency for International Development, you got 15 minutes and get the fuck out. According to the Associated Press, some of the people who worked there were literally crying when they carried out grocery bags and suitcases with what was left inside of their life's work. And people who are supportive of these workers, in other words, the people who weren't fired, or just civilians, applauded and cheered as these people made their exit. Cheered in support, not jeering them, but cheering them. And the EAP reports on one woman coming back out of the building, and she was loaded down. She had a couple of backpacks and bags. She burst into tears when she heard the cheers that greeted her. Well, and a lot of people in that crowd immediately hugged her. Oh, I know, this is very dramatic, isn't it? These filthy goddamn Christian devils look at this kind of comradeship or mutual respect or kindness as weakness. They're Christians, don't you know? And if there's one thing Christians hate, these militant Christian phony fuckers, the one thing they really hate is any sign of any show of compassion or understanding or love or caring or decency or honesty. And they call themselves Christians. I don't know what the fuck they are. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.